Welcome to another episode of Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders for coders about all aspects of creating your best life as a developer.
I'm Will, the accomplished developer, author, and software architect.
And I'm Beej, the journeyman developer sharing my journey in development.
Complete Developer Podcast is supported by listeners like you. We are now on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Complete Developer Podcast.
Everyone has habits, behaviors they do on a regular daily basis. These habits are either moving you toward your goals and success, or they're holding you back from them. In this episode, we look at 7 habits of unsuccessful people, or basically 7 things that you are doing that are holding you back from being more successful. But before we get started, Will, what's been holding you back this week?
Before the episode, I asked whether Dookie is spelled with a Y or an IE because I wanted to be all professional. So if you look at the show notes, you'll see why. Basically, Evernote is Dookie. I keep having problems with it on my tablet, like where it won't open up. And I have to completely uninstall, reinstall, then tell it to download certain folders to the device. It chews up a bunch of time. And they do an update and it screws me over. So it happened this weekend while I was at my parents' house, and I was like, all right, I'm backing up my data out of here so that I can get to it. Like if I'm in a hurry, I don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
And then I found out that the export functionality, they downgraded it. It only exports in their precious proprietary XML format that you can't read in anything else unless you just want to open it up and look at XML. And it ticked me off, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna write something that parses this and turns it into Markdown, and I'm done. Then I found that somebody else had also gotten very ticked about it, and they already had a completed thing on GitHub, so I just used theirs. So just a fair warning, if you are still using Evernote, you probably just need to evacuate at this point because their stuff just keeps getting more unstable, and they seem to want to push new features without making sure that they're not breaking installers, those kind of things, and so it updates. And then when you open it in Android, it just immediately closes, and you have to do a complete uninstall and reinstall to get it back, which is pretty obnoxious. So yeah, I canceled the account yesterday. I got all my stuff out and they're gone. They're off my boxes.
It kind of makes you wonder if, they're going, hey, we don't want to do this anymore, so we're going to make it so miserable that everybody leaves so we can just stop doing this now.
Yeah, I think it's because it's a complex product and they added stuff to it over time. And it instead of being a note-taking app like it was when I started with it, you could tag stuff and you could do a whole bunch of things that were really neat and helpful. And then they're like, oh, we're going to make it where you can scan business cards. Oh, we're going to do all these other, we're going to have integrated scanners and just over the top document management stuff. And they broke their core system.
Yeah, that happens. It's obnoxious, but it does happen.
Yeah. So speaking of broken core systems, how was your week?
Well, my motorcycle broke down on Monday night. So I rode it out after work to a thing, and it was fine. Get there, I'm riding back, and I'm probably like 3 miles from home, and start sputtering. I just filled the tank up. Like, I know it definitely needs an oil change, but I wouldn't think that would be causing this issue. Like, if I can just get it home, I can start working on it. I get maybe a quarter of a mile from my road and it just completely dies. So thankfully it was mostly downhill. So I coasted to the church at the end of the road and then got about halfway up the embankment going into the parking lot when I lost all my momentum and I had to walk it up the rest of the way. But I got it most of the way into the parking lot before that happened. So that was nice. Then I just called some friends and they came and picked me up and I left the bike there. I got another friend who's coming out tomorrow who's going to help me move it back over to the house. Talked to my pastor who has a similar bike to mine and knows a lot more about vehicles than I do. He was asking me what I thought it was. I was like, I think it's the alternator. And I kind of gave him the symptoms and my reasoning. He's like, yeah, it sounds about right. So looks like I'm going to be replacing the alternator in this bike, which will be fun. I've not replaced an alternator in a motorcycle before, so I get to try something new because I just don't want to pay someone else to do it. But I'm like, I can do this. I can figure it out. So
I'm all about when it's mechanical parts on something that I'm depending on not falling apart while I'm going down the road. I'll pay somebody else to do that.
this is, like I said, this is an alternator. So
Yeah, I just don't know that I'm going to put everything else back together right. I feel like every time I've had to do something like that, I end up with like 3 or 4 screws and some other piece missing, and I'm like, where did these even come from?
yeah, I'm not like that.
Yeah, that it just doesn't. It's just not my jam. I mean, I'm okay at it, I guess, but
No, I'm pretty good at mechanical stuff. I just don't know, but I've got a good sort of like intuition for it. So, but yeah. Anyway, that's actually where this episode came from. I had another episode in mind that I will eventually write. That I was going to work on Monday night, but then I ended up spending a couple hours waiting on a ride and all that stuff. I did not have time when I got home to write that. So
yeah, I guess you couldn't really walk home in riding boots.
Well, I mean, I could have, but it was still 2.5 miles away from home. So it was still faster.
So you could have run it.
I could have run it. I would not want to run it because I had already run that day. But yeah, I could have run it. You're right. That is true. I could have run that.
That would have been a much more epic story. You run home, then you run over and get an alternator, and you run back, light a bonfire in the church parking lot so you got enough light, place the alternator, just leave.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. No.
Hey, do it for the podcast, man. It's good storytelling.
Do it for the podcast. Okay. I can just tell the story. I don't have to actually do it,
Right.
It's what storytellers do. But no. So this episode actually came from, I listened to a motivation podcast. Speaking of running, our podcast, a motivational playlist when I run. And one of them is things that successful people don't do. So that's what led to this. That, and having read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it's sort of like a play on that. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I really need to stop saying that. I said that last night. It's when I was speaking, and it's bad. All right.
Saving money is hard, especially when you take my advice on mechanical issues.
True. Lucas Casadas is a fee-only certified financial planner. He owns and runs Level Up Financial Planning virtually out of Fort Collins, Colorado.
And just like us here at Complete Developer Podcast, he focuses on helping you to not only establish a real plan for what your finances need to look like, but to take action on that plan so that you can create your best life.
Guys, investing in financial planning services really comes down to whether or not you can improve your finances. With the help of Level Up, the compounding impact of making better financial decisions will easily pay for itself.
And speaking of paying for itself, Level Up has a unique pricing model that will help you no matter where you are in your financial journey.
Best of all, Lucas is a fiduciary for his clients. And what that means is he's not here to sell you a product, but to guide you to a better financial solution.
And you can catch his podcast, Techie Personal Finance Boot Camp, where he covers financial topics that you probably face. And he also interviews other IT professionals who share how they navigated their own careers. And there's even more stuff at levelupfinancialplanning.com.
Most people see those who are successful as having learned what it takes to be successful. While it does take a lot of hard work and doing the right things to be successful, there are several things that can hold you back from reaching your goals and being successful. These bad habits need to be stopped and replaced before you can really start moving toward your goals.
The idea here is based on Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That looks at the habits and behaviors of effective, successful people and how they can be replicated. This take on the 7 habits are the ones that you don't want, however. These are the habits that you want to break, is basically what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, in this episode, we're going to talk about 7 habits that prevent you from being successful. We'll describe each one and then discuss how you can break that habit to move into success. Then in the aftercast, we'll actually discuss Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
So the first habit that you need to break is caring what others think. And basically the idea here is you don't waste time trying to live for other people. Now, that doesn't mean that you completely ignore what other people think. it just, like I always have to explain that to people because they go, oh, don't care what other people think, so just be a jerk. It's like, no, you take into account what other people think. It's just you don't let what other people think destroy your life.
Well, yeah, and that's a big thing here is you don't let them be jerks to you either. So the idea is you don't let them run your life, but you don't run over other people, and you care about how their lives, like about their lives and what they're doing to affect them, but you don't let their ideas affect you. You want to ignore what others have to say. The only person you can be is you. And so when people tell you how to try, what they think about how you should do something or how you should live your life, yeah, that's really irrelevant. And unless it's like, oh, hey, and again, this is if you're seeking advice for something or if they're guiding you in how to live a particular life. It's like, oh, hey, here's what works. Here's what I found to be successful. That's different from, oh, you should be doing this. Like I do remember when I first got started in software development, when I was learning. Do you remember my mom was like, you don't need to be wasting your time on those computers. You need to go out and get a real job. Like,
get a sales job.
Yeah. I'm like, I've got a sales job and it doesn't pay
This
me.
is why I'm motivated now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the thing with advice like that is you look at the advice and you go, you don't completely discard it. You just go, how can I test this?
Yeah.
Right. And see if it's good advice or garbage advice, because sometimes people will give you really, really good advice unsolicited that actually does make sense, but it's probably one time out of 1,000. And so you go, hey, how can I test it? And if somebody's saying this and they have a perception that this advice is good advice, why do they have that perception? Like if you take it as a thing that you want to kind of chew on a little bit and get something out of it, maybe not what they tried to give you, that's okay too. Yeah. It's just you don't take directions from them. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you remember when we started the podcast, we had several people that were just like, you're never going to get anywhere. You guys will probably quit after, 6 or 8 episodes. You won't get much circulation. It's like, we're still here 7 years later.
Yeah.
And their advice sucked. It had no relevance to anything. So the main point here is that constructive criticism will help you to grow, but you can't internalize other people's fear or their doubts or their optimism either in a lot of cases.
So the next habit that you have to break is saying yes to everything. And this is one of those where I point to myself on it because I'm really bad about this. Some people don't want to disappoint, don't want to risk losing a relationship, whether it be a friendship, mentor, colleague, whatever, by turning down a request. And they have a legitimate fear. They actually fear losing that if they say no.
And, this kind of comes down to, people's relative fear of abandonment in a lot of respects. But what you have to realize is that if you cannot say no, what ends up happening is you're just completely buried in stress. And it's usually stress over stuff that you don't care that much about anyway, which doubles it, right? Because it's like, oh, I've got to do this thing that I hate. And here we are. So,
yeah. Now, to get over this, what you want to look at is like outside of your normally assigned workload, only take on tasks or projects that you're sure you want to do. And I know I do a lot of stuff. I get to do a lot of stuff because there's a lot of things I want to do. I can't do all of the things I want to do because there is literally not enough time in the day to do all the things that I want to do.
Yeah. And you only get about 30,000 days.
Yeah. So I have to be selective of what I choose to do and do the ones that I want to do the most. But I have to watch what I say yes and what I say no to.
Yeah. And the work thing is especially pernicious, right? Where your boss is like, oh, we need to do this thing. And, it's going to be after hours and we're not going to pay you any extra. And you'll get like that same sort of thing in a lot of, you'll get that in friendships. You'll get it at different groups you're in. You get it from family. But work seems to be the worst one for a lot of people because you feel like, hey, everything in my life is going to get disrupted because they can fire me if I don't do this. But we all have to start pushing back. And I think that's kind of happened with the post-COVID world as people have realized, hey, Like I can still get my job done in way less than 40 hours a week if nobody's wasting my time.
Yeah.
So we've had a definite sea change there. I will also say that saying yes to one thing is saying no to something else. You're simply not going to be here forever. Your time on this planet is finite, and you have to choose how you're going to spend it. If you don't, other people will choose it for you.
Yeah. And that's something that, I've been thinking a lot about lately, about how, so many people are like, precious resources. And people are like, oh, well, money is a precious resource. I'm like, not really. Like, there's always going to be more ways to get money. You can't get more time. Time is a true resource that once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, I think the issue with money is that when you're broke, you have to look for it. Like you gotta find ways to get it so that you can take care of your living expenses. The thing is, you come to a point where you're comfortable, and the money isn't the only thing. And if it becomes the only thing, what you end up doing is spending it on stuff you don't care about anyway.
Well, and that's just the thing. Even I just have looked back at my life. I'm like, even before, money was never like, when I didn't have it, it wasn't a big thing, because spending time with people, the way I spend my time, was always more important. I did trade time for money. That's called working. But yeah, it's just like, never understood that, because there are people who that is like their primary focus.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is some degree of stuff that you do have to deal with money, right? Like, for instance, my daughter's going to college in 4 years, and that's a lot of money, and it's got to come from somewhere. So I still have to keep it in mind without it being the only thing that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that money is not important. What I'm saying is money is not a finite resource.
Yeah, well, and it's a means to an end.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the other real issue there, is like going, oh, if I have $1 million, I can do X, whatever X is. And you're like, well, could you figure out a way to do it for 100,000? Because if you can, that's a lot more achievable, and you don't have to throw away your whole life for that money potentially. Or could you figure out how to do it for free? Would be even better.
Yeah. By saying no to less important things, you allow yourself to have more time for the ones that are important to you.
Yeah. Of course, the key there is knowing what's actually important to you.
Yeah, that is true.
And weighting things appropriately. So the next negative belief or negative
bad habit. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of both, really, like it's because like belief is a habit of the mind.
Yeah.
Is believing that things aren't possible. So, if something's been done before, you probably can do it with enough work and effort.
Yeah. There's an entire track on that motivation playlist that is just about this one point.
Yeah. I mean, there was a dude that ran was it a 4-minute mile? I'm trying to remember. It was like in the 50s.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, nobody will ever be able to do it. And then Dude Bro does it. And then somebody else does it like 6 months later. And then there's a floodgate opening of people doing it.
Yeah.
Like 3-minute mile or 4-minute. I can't remember.
Probably 4 minutes.
I don't run.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably 4 minutes. That's pretty fast. Couldn't quite imagine 3-minute mile. I'm like a quarter of a mile at 3 minutes.
That's pretty, it's pretty insane. I mean, we like to challenge people here at Complete Developer Podcast, and we'll give you $1.50 if you run a 3-minute mile. I mean, it's not that bad, right? It's just 1,760 feet in a minute, which is, I mean, you're only going 29 feet a second.
I mean,
not that fast. You'll be fine.
I mean, it's all you got to do it is for 3 minutes. You just got to maintain that pace for 3 minutes.
Totally, like you pull it off and you break that record, I'll give you $1.50. You can go buy a Coke because you're going to need it.
Can you buy a Coke for that much?
I'm sure. Well, if you can run, a mile in 3 minutes, you can steal one and get away.
Goodness, you would go there. All right. So kind of the corollary to that is, if it hasn't been done before, then you can find a way to get it done.
Yeah. And it may be looking at it a different way.
Yeah. This is something that Will and I have gotten really good about. We were already good at before the podcast, but the podcast has really forced us to develop this skill, because there's a lot of stuff that we're like, oh, we don't know anyone who's done this before. We've developed friends who have at this point, but when we got started, we didn't know anybody who was a podcaster. And so we just did it all, went through it. We've done other things too. Like I know, like in our personal lives, it's like, oh, we don't know anybody, nobody, like we've got no examples to go on. I mean, we do this all the time in software development though.
Yeah.
Like how often do you have a problem and you go to Stack Overflow and
there's that one guy with a problem like 6 years ago, and you start like trying to track his username down on Reddit to see if you can contact him.
What's the guy who posts on Stack Overflow all the time?
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Who answers all those questions. Oh, I can't remember him. But yeah, he hasn't gotten to that one yet, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
John Skeet, yes. So you go to Stack Overflow, John Skeet hadn't seen it yet, so he hadn't answered it. And you're like, what do I do?
I feel like sometimes I wonder if he's like a really, really smart AI with like a really slow internet connection. Just how well he solves problems. But he can't get all of them, which, we don't expect that, but yeah. But, when it comes to your goals, impossible and no should not be in your vocabulary. And what this typically is going to mean, by the way, is not being fixed on the way that you look at achieving those goals. So like one of the things that really helped the Wright brothers out was they were able to iterate quickly. Right? They weren't like, oh, an aircraft does this and we're going to make it this way because nobody had one. So they had to try out a whole bunch of things and they didn't accept no as an answer. They just made it where they could iterate quicker. And that's what you're going to have to do.
Yeah, you have to start to see no and impossible as the start of negotiations in your career in business, except for when it comes to consent, because no means no.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that is not what we're talking about here. That is not up for negotiation in that context.
Yeah, it really sucks that we have to say that, because it
does suck that we have to say that in this world. But yeah, no, I want to make that explicitly clear. That is not what we're talking about, but we're talking about in business negotiations.
Yeah, well, and when impossible or no comes up, that also indicates that it's a very valuable problem to solve. Because if you can do it and other people can't, you just cross the moat. You're in the castle.
Yeah. So guys, if you're a software engineer, you've been there. It's 9 p.m. You're finally unwinding from work. Your phone buzzes with an alert. Something's broken. And your mind is already racing. What could be wrong? Is it the server? Is it the network? Is it back end or front end? Do we have slow running queries? You don't know. Now the whole team scrambling from tool to tool, messaging person after person to find and fix the issue. That won't happen if you get New Relic.
New Relic combines 16 different monitoring products that you normally would buy separately, so engineering teams can see across their entire software stack in one place.
More importantly, you can pinpoint issues down to the line of code so you know exactly why the problem happened and can resolve it quickly.
That's why the dev and ops teams at companies like DoorDash, GitHub, Epic Games, and more than 14,000 other companies use New Relic to debug and improve their software.
Whether you run a cloud-native startup or a Fortune 500 company, it takes just 5 minutes to set up New Relic in your environment.
That next 9 p.m. phone call is just waiting to happen. Get New Relic before it does. And you can get access to the whole New Relic platform and 100 gigabytes of data free forever. No credit card required. Sign up at newrelic.com/CDP. That's newrelic.com/CDP. newrelic.com/CDP.
So the next habit that we're going to discuss is also sort of a feeling belief. It's feeling trapped by your circumstances. Everyone has to start somewhere at some point. On a lot of times, most of the time, that is from the ground up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at how we all arrived here, naked and screaming. That's basically as bad as it's, going to start, right? And what this actually means is you you may have to go, okay, yeah, my position right now stinks, and I'm going to take on a temporary position until something better presents itself. I've done this several times in my career. I've taken on jobs that I absolutely hated because it was a bad time in the market, and my skills weren't, they were a little bit rusty, and this is what was available, and food had to get bought. So take on a bad job and you hang on until you're on the other side of it.
Well, that's like what we were talking about earlier. I when I was learning to code, I still needed to pay the bills. So I took on sales jobs, which were, I've got the personality for it. It's just, it's being on all the time. That's my issue with sales. I can do it. I can be on, but you have to be on constantly. And that was just wearing me out. But I did it until I could get a job as a software developer.
Yeah. So, and, this kind of, it's interesting, considering your case, because you're actually a pretty common case in some respects. I mean, less than 27% of people work in a field related to their college major. Of course, you've had a variety of college experiences at this point, but I mean, even so, it's not. Well, of course, now I guess with the master's stuff, you do have some of that. So,
yeah, I mean, it's my college experience is not normal. So, guys, there are a lot of different paths and options along those paths to get to where you want to be. There's not one direct line, unless, well, you know what? Even to become a physician, there's more than one way to get there.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, the notion that there is one direct line, it's like a really crappy fantasy novel, like where you're the chosen one and you're just going to go do the thing. Like if it's a good novel, there's bumps and speed bumps and you've got to work around stuff. That, I mean, there's a reason we like that. That's actually the story of our lives.
Yeah. Also, just because you had a goal doesn't mean that it can't change. I mean, we talk about this all the time in our goal setting stuff, especially at the end of the year. Y'all remember a few years ago, my truck got stolen, and mid-year we reset our goals because Will had some stuff going on that year too that had changed his goals. And we reevaluated our goals. Right now, Will does 13 week?
12-week year.
12-week year. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have 12 weeks on and then 1 week that's like a planning / deloading kind of.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. And I'm probably going to start doing that next year just because I really like the concept.
Yeah. It puts the pressure on you and you're not committed to, like, if you make a goal, it has to be for that 12 weeks. And so when it's done, you decide whether you're going to continue on that course of action or you're going to do something else. So you're not stuck with a goal. And so you don't get into those thought patterns that really lock you in.
I like that. I like it a lot.
So the next thing that you need to stop doing is waiting on other people to give you an opportunity. This was something that was really hard for me to learn, because I thought that, okay, if I just work hard, right, I'll go into an office and I'll work hard and I'll get a pay raise and I'll get promoted. And that didn't happen. What has happened in a number of cases, since I kind of started really figuring this out, is you start doing the job that you're trying to get into, and then you'll become that thing. But like nobody's going to walk out there and go, "Oh, I think you should be a manager," when you're showing no managerial characteristics.
Yeah, I talked about that in my leadership talk, which was basically our April 1st episode. So,
right.
That makes perfect sense. You really want to act on every opportunity that comes your way, and that's going to lead you toward your goals. That's the trick. It's got to be leading you toward your goals. Just because it's an opportunity doesn't mean that it's the right one if it's not moving you toward what you want.
Right. And this, by the way, matches with the stuff earlier about not always saying yes, because you can't say yes to an opportunity that comes up real quick if you're completely booked.
That's true.
I had some wonderful opportunities that I had to let slide by back when I used to say yes to everything. And man, yeah, what a horrific thing. You also don't want to wait on opportunity to present itself or come knocking, right? So you don't just sit there and go, okay, well, someday somebody's going to notice me. Like, you have to get out in front of things and essentially increase the surface area of your luck.
Yeah. Most of the best opportunities, they don't look like opportunities at first.
Right. Well, otherwise somebody else would have gotten it.
Yeah. Well, typically what they look like is some difficulty or some problem that you'd want to avoid. And it's only by not avoiding it that you see the opportunity within that.
Yeah. The obstacle's the way.
Yeah.
That's another good book, by the way. We all know, just like, we need to get like a reading list together, actually.
We should. So the next bad habit is fearing going backward. As we said, your career trajectory is not going to be a straight line. Success is not linear. A lot of times we see successful people and we see, hey, they started here and they ended up here. And that's it. We don't see that, they started here, they made some progress, and then they went back further than where they started from. And then they came forward a little bit more. And like, there's this, like, it is not a straight line.
Not in the least. And you have to get over your fear of falling backward, because it will keep you from going forward. And one of the ways it really helps with this, by the way, is something that was recommended by Seneca. It's practicing poverty. Like, actually sit down and go, all right, I'm going to live like I make $200 a week this week, or that I have, some small amount of money compared to what I would normally have available. And I'm just going to see if I can live on it. And how bad is that? Right? If you're scared and you go do this will get rid of the fear to a large degree, because you'll be like, no, I'm all right. I'm not nearly as screwed as I thought it was. It's probably not going to be comfortable.
Oh no, definitely not. But it's not supposed to be comfortable.
Right. It's, can I adapt?
Yeah. I kind of stuck my foot in my mouth one time not too long ago at work. And, that fear of, oh man, it's a new job. I'm technically on probation. Oh, I hope they don't let me go. What am I going to do if they do that? And then it occurred to me, I was like, well, I mean, I've had my entire life fall apart before. I made it through. I switched careers. If suddenly computers were no longer in existence and I had to find something to do, I could.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, can make it work. So things not working out is part of the process of growth and learning. That's just normal. That's what's going to happen. And just because your career path doesn't go as planned doesn't mean that you failed.
Well, I mean, this is something we like to tell junior to mid-level developers. It's like, you're going to do stupid stuff when you're a mid-level developer, right? Like, you've gotten past the lack of confidence of a junior and you have most of the confidence of a senior, but you don't have the experience yet. Well, guess how you get the experience? Mostly by stepping on rakes.
Making mistakes.
Yeah. Like, it just, you do something and later you're like, man, that was dumb. It's like, yeah, it was dumb, but you didn't know. And you can't internalize it until you get smacked by it. And it's okay. Like, this is something that everybody literally does. I did some monstrously destructive things when I was a mid-level developer. Mostly by over abstracting, by the way, which is why I rail on that so much.
Yeah, I've noticed, just talking to other senior and lead developers, that the things that their little pet peeves are the mistakes that they made.
Yep.
So yeah, I've started to kind of notice it in myself too a little bit. But
yeah, you notice the broth when you're in the soup.
Yeah. Yeah.
Moving backward may seem like a bad thing, but ultimately it doesn't matter if it puts you where you want to be.
Yeah.
And it may be that the way you thought you could go, you couldn't actually go.
Yeah. You may be moving up and like you're moving up into a terminal position.
Yeah. A local optima.
Yeah. You have to step back. Yeah. And maybe even leave and take a lower position somewhere else for that opportunity to move up higher.
I mean, I did this. I had a job a while back. I won't say which job because I think some of the people from there may still listen. But, I got as high in that company as I could get. And they paid well. And frankly, towards the end, it was very miserable. And I felt very, very trapped there. And one day things went over the line and I turned in my notice before I had something else. Yeah, because it was just at a point where it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Now, I still am not up at that pay scale, but I'm close. I'm close and I work 100% remote. So like if we hadn't had the runaway inflation, it'd be great. Yeah. Cause it was like, I think it's 6 or 7K a year difference.
Well, it's not
which
bad.
is a chunk, but it's like, dude, I'm not having to drive 30 minutes one way into an office.
Yeah, I get that, man.
Sit at a desk that hurts me and, have loud coworkers and all this other stuff.
Yeah. I absolutely like having my home office with my really nice chair. I spent some money on this chair.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, actually, the desk that I had, I'm pretty sure I saw it in Stranger Things. It definitely came from the 70s or 80s.
Nice.
So the final mistake or bad habit is thinking that you have nothing new to learn. You only have nothing new to learn when you're dead.
Yeah. Learning is an important tool for success that is not difficult to master. Like, it's not hard to get good at learning. You just do.
Yeah. Well, and I do think that there is one thing that people struggle with is that a lot of folks have not had to think about how they learn things, right? Like they go to school and it's presented to them, and they go to college in many cases and it's presented to them. They get out in the workforce and it's presented to them. And if you're trying to do something that people aren't just handing you the stuff on a silver platter, there's a lot of people that do have trouble with that. The biggest thing there is you just go out and you try to learn, and you're going to figure it out. You figure out how you learn. And if you're not interested in learning new skills, then you're going to fall behind other people who are willing to learn new skills. Okay. We're in tech. That's just the way it is. It's always been like this, and it's faster than it's ever been before. You have no hope if you cannot retool and relearn.
Yeah, we're constantly, like, our industry is constantly growing and changing. You're never going to learn it all, man. Even within your own like niche, like your language, your framework, your area within that language.
Yeah. Or if you stay at the same company for 40 years, there will periodically be something that you learn that surprises you, because you're not omnipotent.
Yeah.
The consistent drive to learn more and get better is what is going to put you ahead of the crowd, because most people don't actually do that. There's a lot of people that give a little bit of lip service to it, and they'll learn when they absolutely have to, but they're going to continue doing it all the time.
So guys, these are broad general habits that you should avoid in order to be successful. Your particular experience with them may not be the same as everyone else's, but the ideas are still the same. Examine yourself, even if you are successful, and see which of these habits you're still clinging to in your life. Then take time and make a plan to drop that habit, and then replace it with a positive one.
Yeah. And if you happen to be interested in the positive habits that you could replace it with, we've actually got that in the aftercast. We're going to be discussing Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Show up there and listen, because it's there.
Stand by for Titanfall.
If you have a question or comment, please email us at neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed through Creative Commons.
For references, show notes, and extra tips and insights, be sure to check out the website at completedeveloperpodcast.com. Help us make the show possible by supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/completedeveloperpodcast. You'll get extras, including a weekly aftercast where we discuss the topic of the week and bonus material with some of our patrons.
You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod, like our page on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram to keep up with news about the show. Join the conversation anytime via Slack by signing up at slack.completedevelopernetwork.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.